Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about black money. What is black money? What are the causes of black money, the impact of black money, and how can we possibly tackle the problem of black money in our country? So, what is black money? Black money is the funds or the money earned on the black market, which we can also call the parallel economy, on which income and other taxes have not been paid. Also, the unaccounted money that is concealed from the tax administrator is called black money. The simplest definition of black money could be the money that is hidden from the tax authorities. Black money can majorly come from two categories. First is illegal activity that one cannot disclose. Second, being legal but unreported activities. So, an example of legal but unreported activity is, for example, you as an individual get a salary of 70K per month, but apart from that, you also have money that is coming from your property as rent, 50,000 per month. Now you do pay tax on the salaried income, but the one you're getting from the rent is unreported. So that basically comes under black money. And illegal activity could be human trafficking, drug trading, etc. So now that we know what black money is, let's talk about the causes of black money in India. So I'll quickly read what the screen has to display for you and then go on to explain each point. The first being unrealistic tax law and tax frauds. Third being different rates of excise duty. Fourth being control policy and quota system, scarcity, inflation, elections in a democratic system, and political funding. The next being real estate transactions, then privatization, agricultural income, corruption, foreign banks, and the last being donations or funds. Now, let's talk about the defective taxation system. So basically in India, the taxation system is defective, complex, and have unrealistic high tax rate. And as you climb up the income ladder, tax gets even higher. In some cases, tax might be up to 30 to 40% of your income. Now, think upon it. Would you be willing to give 30 or 40% of your hard earned income? And thus, you end up disclosing less income. Now, when the tax collection is low, the government income would be low, and thus the expenditure would be low. This also increases the inequality. So the rich are basically not disclosing the full income, and the poor do not have adequate resources. The government is not spending on the poor. So this is the cause of the widening inequality. Now, the second being discretionary power to government officials, or call it corruption or red tapeism. The third being um, low salary of public servants. So, according to an article in the Hindu, it said there is a mismatch between status and salaries of public servants, and thus they resort to corruption and red tapeism. Then the next cause would be leakages in the government development expenditure. So, for every 1 rupees that is spent by the government, only 10 paisa reaches the poor. That is 85% is black money. Then, as I spoke about, elections in a democratic system and political funding. Funding of parties and excessive election expenditure has always been a problem in India. Candidates spend crores of rupees on winning an election, and when they get in power, they would want to make the money back. Then, weak deterrence could also be a cause. For example, there is no conviction, there is super long trials, and the conviction rates are less than 10%. Laws are favored in officials. And then the seventh being lack of stigma attached to corruption. In India, specifically, corruption or black money is not considered an illegal activity, and thus every second person goes on to do that. Eighth being cash economy, or you can also call it an unaccounted transaction or an unorganized economy. So, although India is doing extremely well since the birth of UPI transactions in the country, but cash economy is a big problem since the transactions are not accounted for. So, this was a gist of the causes of black money in India, covering all the points. Now, you must be wondering why is it difficult to measure black money? How the administration is expected to gauge the financial movement that is effectively being avoided. As per the Standing Committee report, the segment that sees the most elevated occurrence of dark cash incorporate land, mining, drugs, dish masala, gutka, tobacco, industry, bullion, and where advertising, the entertainment world, instructive establishments, and experts. Each gauge relies on the fundamental aspect made by the originators of the estimator. Thus far, there is no consistency in the supposition made by the different offices entrusted with the estimation of dark economy. Now, there are several impacts. There are direct and indirect impacts of black money. Let's look at them. First is loss of tax revenue to the government. And like I mentioned, if the tax revenue collection would be low, less would be the government budget and less would be the expenditure. And this adversely affects the development expenditure. The second being, it increases inequality. Now, this is born from the first point. Since the government cuts down expenditure, poor will be affected adversely. Then third being, effect on national income and per capita real income. So now when the national income calculated would be low, the real per capita income would be estimated to be low. Now, point being decrease in the quality of public goods and services. Like I mentioned, low expenditure by the government adversely affects the development expenditure. Now, let me explain you in the previous format. Let me read these points from you and then I will continue explaining them. Higher taxation and inflation, difficulty in the formation of monetary and fiscal policy, increased criminal activities in the society. Now, let me break those points for you and explain them further. So, black money also promotes non-productive investment. Example, jewelry, bullion, real estate. Now, what happens when people start investing in jewelry? The gold imports increase. The CAD, that is the current account deficit, also increases with that. The forex flow increases and the balance of situation might be in a problematic state. And for example, when people invest in real estate, this being the second example, when people invest in real estate, what they prefer to do is pay the 20% of the amount in white and 80% in black. Now, when they further go on to sell the real estate that they've invested in, or the apartment or the land, they sell in 50% black and 50% white. Now, the gap, the 30% of the income they have converted from black to white. Since earlier they paid in 20% white, 80% black, and then they went on to sell 50% black and white. So they have successfully converted 30% of the income to white. Now, this also impacts a lot of other things. For example, land or gold becomes extremely expensive for poor people for genuine use. The next point being, it promotes conspicuous consumption under reporting of national income. So conspicuous consumption is basically the things that you do not need, but you specifically buy for show off or say higher status in the society. For example, some artifacts, paintings that you do not particularly need. But now, since the consumer is spending on them through black money, it accounts under national income. This results in imbalance. The fifth point being underreporting of national income and per capita income, like I mentioned in the third point. The sixth point being increased flow of money to foreign countries, or you might know them as Hawala transactions. Now, what people with loads of black money would want to do is invest in shell companies. So basically, this is also known as round tripping. So this would cause loss of income for the government and drain of resources from India to foreign countries. Now, how does one generate black money? So out of book transactions, basically transactions that are not recorded in the national income, and parallel book of accounts, manipulation of book of accounts, manipulation of sales and receipts, underreporting production, manipulation of expenses, and all sorts of other manipulations. And then transactions to associate enterprises, manipulation of capital of closing stock, capital expenses, land and real estate transaction like we spoke about earlier, bullion and jewelry transaction that I also gave you example of in gold, then financial market transaction, public procurement, and non-profit sector. So another thing that people with loads of black money does is, since the non-profit sector is not taxed as heavily, they tend to invest in non-profit sector. And then the informal sector and cash economy, which is unaccounted for and thus loses track, external trade and transfer pricing, trade-based money laundering, tax havens. Now we'll talk about tax havens when I explain the measures to you. Offshore financial centers, for example, Swiss bank, investment through innovative derivative instruments. Now, let's talk about how the government can curb black money, or what are the possible measures that it can take. So, let me read out and then go on explaining all of them. Demonetization. So, by demonetization, we mean demonetization of currency of high value, say rupees 500 or 1000 in case of India, since the black money is assumed to be kept in currency of high value. Then voluntary disclosure schemes, raids, rationalization of control, taxation reform, vigorous prosecution, special bearer bonds. We'll also talk about special bearer bonds, rewards and awards, publicity, arousing public conscience, and other measures. So let's first talk about tax reform. The government should focus on keeping a realistic tax rate for the salaried people. And by keeping a real uh, realistic tax rate, I mean not encouraging taxes which allows the salaried person or an individual to pay 30 to 40%, because no one would like to pay their hard earned income to government, and that to almost half the amount. Then let's talk about demonetization. So in India, demonetization happened three times. So the first one is that we're all aware of, November 2016. And then it happened in 1946 and 1978. Now, it is estimated that at least 20% black money will return to the economy after demonetization. So demonetization is basically done for sterilization purpose. Then let's talk about promoting cashless or less cash economy. Since we're very far away from achieving a cashless economy, so I would state it as promoting less cash economy and reducing cash transfer. since when you use digital payment methods such as UPI or bank transfers, it is easier for the government to record all the transactions. Then fourth point would be use of ICT and direct benefit transfer. Then fifth point would be voluntary disclosure scheme. Now we have we have had three types of voluntary disclosure schemes in India that I'll talk about. The first one is in 1997. That is the voluntary disclosure of income scheme. Now, when you disclose your black money under this scheme, you do not need to tell the source to the government, and you need to pay only a 30% tax on income with no sort of prosecution. So when you pay the 30% tax on the undisclosed income, basically the remaining 70% is now white money. So this is to motivate people to come voluntarily and state their income. The second was in 2016, which is the IDS, Income Declaration Scheme. Now, since 1997 scheme wasn't very morally or ethically right for the people and for the government. So it basically could be stated as to motivate people to get away with black money and face no serious consequences and pay the same tax rate that the people, the salaried people or the people who disclose their full salary have been paying, that is 30%. So the 2016 voluntary scheme was changed a bit to 30% tax and 15% of surcharge. So total, the individual had to pay a 45% tax. Then the third scheme that we're going to talk about is the one introduced in 1981. That is the bearer bonds. So for example, if you buy a government bond of 10,000 for 5 years, although there is no tax or no interest involved, you do not need to disclose the income, and you get it after 5 years. You get the same exact amount, that is 10,000 after 5 years. So basically, your black money has been converted to white money in 5 years. The sixth being administrative measures. For example, linking your PAN, Aadhaar to your bank accounts or the UPI accounts for transactions. And TDS, that is the tax deduction from source stream. So the tax will be deducted from the employer, and the employer will then pay to the government. For example, when an individual gets his or her salary, it is already tax deducted salary. For example, 10% is given to the government by the employer, and the employer will then give you a certificate that you can show while filing ITR. And also in case of jewelry, you pay 1% TDS that the jewelry seller will pay to the government. He will in turn give you a certificate that you can claim while filing RTI. Now, there can also be some restrictions on cash payments. For example, only payments less than 2 lakhs can be paid in cash. This will also promote cashless economy. Then, the sixth being legislative measures. For example, there have been many acts to prevent black money flow and hawala transactions. Some of them being Black Money Act 2015, then Benami Transaction Prohibition Act, which was amended in 2016, Prevention of Black Money Laundering Act 2002, and then what you might know as FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act from 1999, RTI, Lokpal Bill, and then Prevention of Corruption Act. These are some legislative measures. Now, international cooperation can also play a role in preventing the flow of black money. For example, Financial Action Task Force that was set amongst G7 in 1989. So this is basically to encourage cooperation amongst member countries to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, etc. The headquarters of the Financial Action Task Force is based in Paris with 37 members, amongst which 35 are countries and 2 are organizations. And the organizations are EU and GCC. Then, second point under international cooperation would be tax information exchange agreement. So, it is a bilateral agreement to exchange information amongst governments. Then, the third point under international cooperation is multilateral automatic exchange of tax info. And then, double taxation avoidance agreement. For example, let me relate and talk to you about tax havens. So, the foreign investment that comes to India majorly is from Mauritius and Singapore. From Mauritius, 35% of the total tax investment is accounted, and from Singapore, 15%. So, although if we see truly, only 1 or 2% will be from Mauritius, and same for Singapore. Now, what the wealthy countries do is they invest in India through Mauritius and Singapore. Since Mauritius and Singapore are tax havens, that is, small countries with low or very low tax rates, having liberal economic policies, secrecy of investors, and low tax jurisdiction. So, the double taxation avoidance agreement can sometimes act in an opposite manner. So, this was what black money is and the causes and effects and how to possibly prevent black money. So thank you for watching the video.